Very good. Well, thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar on marketing at farmers market. And I'm Patrick Byers. I'm a horticulture field specialist with University of Missouri Extension, and I'm excited to be teaming with Springfield Community Gardens for this evening's workshop.
And I am Anna Withers. I'm the Farmer Outreach Coordinator for Springfield Community Gardens. And we are a nonprofit based in Springfield, Missouri, whose mission is a community where everyone has access to healthy local food. This workshop on marketing at farmers markets is generously sponsored by the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, or BFRDP, from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Our speaker tonight is University of Missouri Extension horticulture field specialist Patrick Byers, and I'll let him introduce himself further in a moment. But just some housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions throughout the night, please ask as we go. You can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your question during the presentation, and we'll stop periodically to chat with Patrick about them. There's also a chat feature at the bottom of your screen, so please use this for comments and put your questions in the Q&A. That helps us keep track of the questions and make sure we get everything answered throughout the night. Also, once you leave this workshop, a screen will pop up with a link to a post-workshop survey. And this survey is used in SCG's reporting to the USDA and also helps us provide meaningful workshops in the future. We'd appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill that out after the workshop. And if you'd like to refer to this workshop later, it will be on SCG's Agriculture Workshop playlist on our YouTube channel. I'll put that link as well as our website, social media, and tonight's exit survey in the chat in just a moment. That's it from me. So thank you for being here, and I'll hand it back off to Patrick.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, well, we're going to spend the next roughly 90 minutes talking about marketing at farmers market. And this is a fascinating topic. There's so much room for creativity and entrepreneurship when it comes to this approach to marketing for specialty crops. And I'm particularly excited about this because for many years, that was my story. In addition to being a horticulture field specialist with University of Missouri Extension, I also had a peach orchard on my farm. I grew about 5 acres of peaches, which we direct marketed through farmers market. So I'll be sharing some of my experiences tonight as well. As Anna mentioned, I am a field specialist in horticulture with University of Missouri Extension. I'm based in Southwest Missouri, and my home county is Webster County, and I serve 10 counties in the south central part of Missouri. And if you took my job and summed it up in one sentence, my job is to help farmers be profitable in the short term and sustainable in the long term. I've worked for Extension for a little over 13 years now, and prior to that, I worked for 18 years for the Missouri State Fruit Experiment Station. So I've had a chance to focus my career on commercial specialty crop production. And I'll be sharing with you tonight the experiences of many farmers that I've worked with over the course of those 30 plus years of serving Missouri farmers. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. Okay, Anna, can we see the presentation?
Yes, it looks good.
Very good. So again, I like this picture. This is quite a few years ago, but I really enjoyed growing peaches. There's nothing better than biting into a sweet, juicy, aromatic tree-ripened peach. The only thing that's better is seeing the pleasure on people's faces when they've purchased those peaches from you and have experienced that same experience. And so it's all about that, and that's what we're going to be focusing on this evening. As I mentioned before, this is a partnership with Springfield Community Gardens. Springfield Community Gardens is a nonprofit organization whose vision is a community where everyone has access to healthy local food. Springfield Community Gardens manages, I think 17 community gardens across the greater Greene County area. They have a very innovative farmer incubator, and they also have recently developed a hospital garden in cooperation with Cox Hospitals. So reach out to Springfield Community Gardens, learn more about their program on their website or on their Facebook site. And then our third partner is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a number of programs to support specialty crop farmers of all scale, including small-scale diversified specialty crop farms. The entry point to these resources is through the Farm Services Agency office. You'll notice a lot of acronyms when we discuss USDA programs. FSA has an office in nearly every county, and in those offices, you'll find the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the acronym is NRCS, and the Risk Management Agency, the acronym is RMA. Both of these branches of the USDA have programs in place to support diversified direct market farmers. So reach out, learn more about these programs by visiting your local FSA office or visit the farmers.gov resources website. Well, here's what we're going to talk about this evening. We'll have a bit of introductory material. Then we'll spend a little time in an overview of marketing in a farmer's market. What is this experience going to look like if it's something that you're considering? Now, the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Grant, which is helping fund this evening's workshop, of course, is focused on beginning farmers. And so my remarks are of necessity somewhat general in nature. And as we go through the material, if there's something that you'd like to delve into more deeply, just drop a note in the Q&A box and we will tackle it. And we have plenty of time this evening to tackle any questions you might have. Even if they seem a little bit unrelated to the material, bring them up and we will definitely start a discussion. Then we'll talk about the 7 keys for success at farmers market. And again, this is based upon the experiences of probably 100 farmers that I've worked with over the years that have been successful in marketing at farmers market. And then I'll just share a few bits of experience of my own from when I marketed peaches through Byers Orchard at the farmers market. And we'll conclude with some resources. So you're interested in marketing specialty crops. We've had a range of workshops to this point talking about just that. 2 nights ago, we talked about wholesale scale marketing. And last month, we gave an overview of all the different marketing approaches for specialty crop growers. Well, this is excellent. I want to congratulate you on your interest. It's very important that we build our local food system. But the question, of course, is, have you figured out how to get to where you want to go? I like this picture. This is at a recent farm walk that we held at a local farm here in Greene County. And once a month, the farmer invites us out. We spend a couple of hours walking across the farm, looking at what's going on, and then delving into some particular topic related to specialty crops in detail. This evening, we were talking about marketing. And it was interesting. You can look down this line of people, and each one shared their dreams, their plans. Several of them were thinking of larger scale marketing, but the majority were interested in direct marketing. And the majority were interested in farmers markets. And this was exciting, again, to hear about what their plans were, but also to see such a diversity of approaches to a common marketing strategy. And so again, we'll be talking about many different things tonight. If there's any questions, please enter them into the Q&A. This is where the recording of our general marketing workshop is located. You can also find the other workshops that we've presented over the past several years at the Springfield Community Gardens YouTube channel. So visit that site and take advantage of those recordings. Now, very important when you're thinking about marketing specialty crops to have a marketing plan. Why is a plan important and when do you particularly need a plan? Well, if you're a new farmer, if you're just starting out, that plan is invaluable. You definitely want to put some time and effort into developing that plan before you plant your first seed or transplant. It's also important if you're expanding or changing enterprises. Let's say that you've noticed an opportunity at a local farmer's market and you want to expand into that market, the marketing plan will help guide you. As you add more people to the farm, as your farm grows, a marketing plan is helpful. And oftentimes there are rough waters in any sort of business, including farming, and a marketing plan can be very helpful from the standpoint of developing, say, a backup market, if a primary market, for whatever reason, can't absorb all of your crop. So spend some time and energy on that marketing plan. We have a recorded workshop on business and marketing plans. Check that out. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. As far as an individual contact, my contact information is available at the end of the workshop, and I'd love to visit with you about your plans and perhaps share some information that I've gleaned over the years of working with so many successful direct marketers. I also want to mention the Missouri Ag Intel tool. This is a very helpful tool developed by the University of Missouri. And basically, it looks at your realities, your farm location, the markets that are available within easy driving distance of your farm, the crops that are options for your farm, and also your expertise as a farm manager. And this is all interactive, it's all online. And I thought we might spend just a quick moment looking at the food market evaluation tool, because one of the steps in deciding if marketing at a farmer's market is for you is to take a look at the farmer's markets that are in your area, that are within easy driving distance of your farm. And the Ag Intel tool will do just that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this particular presentation, and we will bring up the website.
And I'm also going to just drop that link into the chat box for easy
Okay, thank you.
access. Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, hold on just a moment here. I've lost my link. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, can we see the Ag Intel tool now?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Well, we have a number of options in using this tool. And the one that we're going to take a look at is the food market evaluation tool, because that's going to give us some key information on farmers markets close to the location of your farm. So you bring up the Ag Intel site, you click on this particular link, and did the link work? Anna, can we see the map of Missouri now?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, very good. Let's zoom in a little bit, and I will use my home farm as our test case here. So let's move down to Webster County. Okay, I live near Fordland, so we're going to drop a pin right here. And here is a map that shows radius areas, 10, 20, and 30-mile radius areas. And let's take a look at the local food report for this particular area. So as we look down here, it gives us information on demographics. The population, for example, if you look within 10 miles, there's 18,000 people around my farm. Within 30 miles, there's 399,000 people. Those are a lot of potential customers at farmers markets. Now, what are the farmers markets that are available? Well, if we look at the closest farmers markets, and this is within 20 miles, we have 5 of those available. They include several small town farmers markets with Rogersville, Seymour, and Marshfield, and then 2 larger farmers markets, Ozark Farmers Market and Farmers Market of the Ozarks. And let's see if we can take a look at something a little bit bigger here. Well, looks like we've got some information here. Here's the complete listing. Okay, so now if we're looking at a range of farmers markets that are around my farm, if we look within 50 miles, we have a lot of options as far as farmers markets, including several of them in Springfield. So again, this is a very useful tool. With just a few clicks, I can bring up this kind of data, and I can see which markets are available. And if I'm interested, all of these farmers markets have websites. I can drill down deeper, but a couple of things to note: within 20 miles of my farm, I have large farmers markets in the case of Farmers Market of the Ozarks and Greater Springfield Farmers Market. And I have a number of smaller farmers markets. Again, I mentioned Rogersville and Seymour and Marshfield, but there's also farmers markets in places like Nixa and Fairgrove and Willard and Branson. There might be possibilities as well. But the bottom line is this tool is a very useful way of learning more about the marketing opportunities that are within easy driving distance of your farm. So take advantage of that tool. Okay, let's go ahead and stop share and go back to the presentation. Okay, Anna, did we successfully get back to the presentation?
We did.
Okay, very good. All right, any questions to this point?
Does not look like it.
Okay, now let's take a look at just sort of some key points related to farmers markets. And again, this is intended to get the thought process started. If you're a beginning farmer, this is a good place to start. If you're already marketing at farmers market, there may be some points here that you want to further delve into. Either way, if there's a question, please enter it into the Q&A, and we will definitely tackle it. Now, the farmers markets offer some definite advantages for the farmers involved. It's a great way to maximize the price received per unit of vegetable. Typically, the highest prices that a farmer can receive for their crop is going to be in a direct market outlet like a farmer's market. It's also a setting where someone else is doing the promotional activity for you. Yes, there can be a benefit in individually promoting yourself at the farmer's market, but the market as a whole, at least effective markets, have a very active promotional program in place that benefits all of the vendors at the farmer's market. There's also a lot of flexibility in what you bring to the market. You can bring whatever cultivars you like of particular vegetables or fruit. You can bring whatever volume you like. You have a great deal of flexibility as a vendor at a farmer's market. And if we look at this particular photo here, you can see that this stand has a lot of diversity in it. There's also no standards as far as pack or grade. You don't have to bring your vegetables in any particular type of box, any particular type of packaging. And the grade, the grade is up to you. Obviously, there is a benefit to bringing fresh, good quality produce, but it all doesn't have to be the same size or packed in the same way. You have a lot of flexibility there. The farmers market gives you direct contact with customers, and this is very important to help build that loyal base of customers. It's also something that customers expect. It's something that they enjoy. It's something that they seek out. And so the farmers market environment, yes, provides lots of benefits to consumers, but the same connection, the same connectiveness that consumers like, farmers like too. And so a farmers market is a great place to establish those relationships with the people who are going to purchase and enjoy those fruits and vegetables, the fruits of the farmer's labor. Now, some other considerations, very important to consider the market carefully. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. Is the best market for you a small market? Is the best market for you a large market? Do you want to go to market more than once a week? In some cases, some markets have 2 or even 3 different times during the week when they're open. Labor costs to market at a farmer's market can be high. You have to have people present at the booth. So you're paying people to market. And that, of course, is something that's in addition to the cost in actually producing the crop. So it's important to recognize that there are labor costs associated with marketing at farmers market. Schedules can be demanding. We'll talk more about that in a moment too. And when I share my experience, that's one of the things that I look back after, over 10 years of not being in business. And it still comes very much to mind how busy we were when we were growing peaches and marketing the farmer's market. The farmer's market can be a competitive atmosphere. Certainly there can be other vendors that have the same types of products that you have. And so it's important to understand how to, first of all, be effective in an atmosphere of competition and how perhaps you can give yourself an edge by differentiating. Looking at this picture here, what do you see? Well, you see garlic. Garlic is a bit of a commodity, but these farmers have gone to great lengths to differentiate their garlic. We have purple striped garlic, we have elephant garlic, and we have white garlic. So we've differentiated at least 2 of the types of garlic from the standard white garlic. And this is what makes the difference when there's other vendors selling the same thing that you are. You've got to have positive interactions with the public. You've got to be able to interact with people of all different temperaments. And if you're not good at that, then find someone in your farm that is. And you have to be willing to abide by market rules. And we'll talk more about these here in a moment as well. Now, some tips for success at farmers market. And again, this is just a bit of a teaser because we'll be talking about all of these things a little bit later on. But to start the discussion off, first of all, your display must be attractive. Looking at this display, this is a work of art. This is a thing of beauty. The vendor who put this display together went to a great deal of effort, first of all, to organize these vegetables. Secondly, to arrange them in pleasing combinations of colors, sizes, and textures, and to make the display in such a way that it has maximum appeal as potential customers walk by and come into the booth. Clear signage is very important. You can see in this picture too, clear signage that discusses the type of vegetables and also the pricing. There should also be signage identifying the farm. Sampling. If the market allows sampling, sampling can be very helpful. This can be one way that you can differentiate your product from other vendors who have the same product. Customer service is always critically important. People do not want to come to the farmer's market and have a Walmart checkout experience. Okay, they want to have a good experience. I mentioned that interaction. Whenever possible, it needs to be a positive interaction. Certified scales. You need a scale that calculates price as well as weight. You want to be as efficient as you can be at farmer's market. This allows a bit more time for that interaction with customers while still serving them well. Take a look at the competition. We can all learn from others that are doing things similar to what we're doing. So check out the competition. And then think about things, again, that can make you more competitive, perhaps season extension, so you can have a particular vegetable crop earlier in the season or later in the season than others at the market, or perhaps growing and marketing something that's unique. Herbs, for example, interesting crops like ginger. There's many different possibilities of unique products. We'll talk more about that here in a moment too. Now, before we go any further, it's a good to ask yourself if this is right for me. And you can ask yourself this now. You can also ask yourself this same question at the end of our presentation. But farmers markets are not for everyone. Okay, do you like working with the public? Some of us are excellent farmers. We're in our element when we're on the farm, when we're working with vegetables. But you put us into a public setting in a market stand, and that is just not a place where we're comfortable, and that's just fine. But there likely is someone on your farm or in your farm or involved with your farm that does like doing that. So find the right person who likes to interact with the public. Where are the farmers markets in your area? We took a look at the Ag Intel tool. That gives us a good feeling for where those markets are. But that's just the first step. Are those markets accepting vendors? Some of them are, some of them aren't. And can you live with the rules? We'll talk more about that in a moment too. Does the market have a sufficient customer base for new vendors? Particularly some of the smaller markets may not have a large customer base. And yes, they may be open to new vendors, but there just may not be enough customer base to support the crop that's brought in by a new vendor. Does the market have a niche for me? If the only crop that you're growing and marketing is a particular commonly available crop, there may be other vendors that are already filling that role. And so we need to take a look at the market to make sure that there is a niche for what you want to do. And how much time will you spend at the market? This is one of the things that I remember vividly from when I was marketing. From start to finish on market day, typically it was an 8 to 10 hour day from the time when we loaded up trucks and headed out to market, set up the stand, marketed the crop, broke down the display at the end of market, and arrived back home. So it was a long day. And so we have to recognize that there is an investment in time and labor and wages paid to that labor to be effective at farmers market. Okay, do we have any questions at this point, Anna?
No, I think you can go ahead.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about 7 keys to success with farmers markets. And we're going to discuss each one of these in detail. But those 7 keys, first of all, choose the right market. Secondly, apply to sell at that market. Third, sign a market contract. Fourth, bring the right equipment. Fifth, design your market display. Sixth, set your prices. And 7, make sales at the market, be an effective marketer. So we'll talk about each one of these. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A box. So let's talk about choosing the right market. Again, when we were looking at the Ag Intel tool and checking out what's available for my farm, within 50 miles of my farm, there were easily 24 possible farmers markets that I could consider. So we need to somehow winnow through those markets and figure out which ones are right for us. And some of this process of winnowing down through the markets can be done remotely. It can be done by looking at where the markets are located and looking at the number of vendors that are currently selling at those markets, looking at the websites. But there's really no substitute for actually going out and visiting the markets. So right up front, plan to invest some time in visiting markets and getting a feel for what those markets are like. And keep in mind that you can belong to multiple markets. Perhaps there's a market that you want to focus on for Saturday sales, but there may be markets that have market days on Tuesdays or Thursdays or Fridays. those might be options too, in addition to your main market on Saturday. Okay, so some of the questions to ask. First of all, does the market attract many customers? You can get a bit of a feel for this as you visit the markets, particularly Saturday markets. Try to figure out where the markets are located and do some research on the people who live and work near those markets. Now, obviously, just looking at the people who live near a market does not give you the complete picture as far as who actually visits and purchases at the market. But typically markets that are in more affluent neighborhoods, more affluent parts of town, typically the vendors at those markets can command higher prices for their products than markets, say, that would be in a rural area, or markets that are in a smaller town, or markets that are in a less affluent part of a city. Now, having work locations near a market can be helpful. Factories, hospitals, schools, governmental buildings, all of these things can provide pools of people that will then support a market close to the location of those businesses. And that's particularly helpful with markets that are operating in the afternoons and evenings as people get off work and head home. Are the days, times, and location of the market convenient for you? And again, you can do some of this work remotely, but try to figure out how things are going to work as far as the schedule of operations on your farm and your approach to marketing, and figure out if a particular market is convenient for you. Keep in mind that some markets have multiple days when they're available. Perhaps they have a main Saturday market, but maybe they have a Thursday evening market or a Tuesday morning market. This can be a benefit, first of all, because you have to just join one market. Typically, there's an annual fee that you pay for joining a market. And if you do this with one market that has multiple sales times, this can save you a bit of money versus joining two different markets. What size stall? Some markets have standard size stalls, and if this just isn't large enough for what you want to do, this might be a problem. Other markets have different size stalls, graduated sizes. Now, frequently there are different charges. As the stall size gets larger, there may be a higher charge for that selling space, but this can be nice to have that much flexibility. Is the market undercover or in the open? Now, on a nice, warm, sunny day in the summer, this might not be as much of a consideration as it might be in the spring or fall, where it can be cool, or it could possibly be a gray or even a little bit drizzly. But having some cover, having the market located in a pavilion or in an enclosed space can be very helpful. If you're in the open, then you become responsible for your shelter. And yes, you can do a pop-up tent or some other structure, but my goodness, it's nice just to back the truck up into a covered pavilion area and then set up your stall in a covered area where you don't have to worry about protection. And what about access? Is it easy to get to? I've had a chance actually several times to visit Pike Place Market in Seattle, which is an absolutely fabulous farmer's market. But quite frankly, the access is a challenge. Getting to downtown Seattle is not an easy thing. And so keep in mind that access might tip you towards one market versus another market. Now, a little bit about rules and regulations. Again, do a bit of a background check, and typically the websites will tell you this, but understand who organizes the market and who makes the rules. Markets typically will be under the umbrella of some organization or agency. In some cases, it's a local or a county or even state organization, such as a city council or a county commission or something like that. It could also be part of a private entity, perhaps under the umbrella of a business development or something like that. But it's important to understand who organizes the market and who makes the rules. Now, how much do farmers pay to market at the farmers market? So there's several things to think about here. Most farmers markets have an annual membership fee, and that's typically paid early in the spring at the organizational meeting that's held each year for the market. And again, this is oftentimes a standard membership fee. Now, frequently, farmers markets have additional charges that are related to a particular market day. And what this might be is what could be called a stall fee, where when you arrive and go to your stall, and sometimes stalls are assigned, in other cases, it's a first come, first served type basis. But once you occupy your stall, you pay a certain fee for that space. And if you come to the market 3 or 4 times a year, you pay that stall fee each time. If you come to the market every week, you pay that stall fee each time. Another approach that some markets have is what's called a PODS, percentage of daily sales. And these markets require their vendors to return a percentage of the sales they have at each market. The amount that's brought in is typically manageable. Oftentimes it's somewhere between 1% and 4%. And then the farmer's market vendor pays that at the end of market day. And I kind of like PODS. It actually rewards it helps support the market, those vendors who are selling large quantities of produce and bringing in large amounts of revenue, then support the market to a larger degree than those vendors who do not. So check out and find out what the market rules are. Again, recognize you'll have an annual fee, and then you may have a stall fee or a PODS. Now, do you have to commit to the market for the whole season? Some farmers markets want you there. They want that space occupied. They want vendors there. And there may be a requirement that you're present for a certain number of market days during the season. Other markets don't have these regulations. You come whenever you have the crop that you want to sell. And particularly if you're growing and marketing something that's seasonal. I mentioned that I had a peach orchard. Our peach season began in early July and lasted until early September. I didn't have anything to sell in April, May, and June, or in October or November. So there was no point in me going to market. So I chose a market that didn't require me to be there for a particular number of sales days. Is insurance required? Some markets require liability insurance. I think personally it's a very good idea to have both product liability and personal liability if you're going to farmers markets. Some farmers markets have an umbrella liability protection policy for their vendors. So check this out as well. Is the market a producers only market? So some farmers markets will allow vendors to only sell products that they grew themselves on their own farms. And it's important that the customers understand if a market is a producer only market, but it's also important for vendors to understand this as well, because this means you can't purchase product from another farmer and then bring it to market and represent it as something that you grew yourself. That's dishonest, and it's against the rules of many markets. Some markets allow what's called supplementation. This is where a vendor can purchase product from other farmers and bring it to the market and sell it at their stall. But frequently, these farmers markets require those produce items to be marked as supplemented, in some cases marked as to where they were grown. So check out the rules from this standpoint. And does the market advertise? Obviously, there's a benefit to joining a market that has an effective promotional program, because a rising tide helps all of the vendors at the market. A rising tide floats all ships, is the saying, and a market that effectively advertises and promotes benefits all the vendors at that market. How do you know which markets are doing this? Well, check out the social media sites, check out newspapers, check out public service announcements, all of the places the farmers markets can promote themselves. Another thing to look at, of course, at the market is the other vendors at the market. Websites frequently will have listings of the vendors at the market. That's a good place to start. But as I said before, you'll need to do some legwork. You'll want to visit the markets and check out what who the other vendors are and what the products are. How many other farmers sell at the market? Is it a large market, or is it there room for more vendors? What products do the other farmers sell? Are you going to be able to differentiate what you have available from what other vendors are already selling? What advantages might you have over farmers at this market? And sometimes, these advantages are based upon the product that you're selling. In other cases, it may be based upon the location of your farm, and maybe based upon the story that you have to tell about the farm, or some other way that you differentiated yourself from other vendors at the market. But obviously, all of these things need to be investigated to decide if a market is right for you. Okay, Anna, do we have any questions at this point as far as investigating which is the right farmer's market?
No, you must have covered it pretty well.
Okay, now let's talk about applying to sell at the market. Now, you'll need some basic pieces of information when you fill out the application and present that to market management. First of all, it's a good practice to have your crop plan in hand. That way, management can understand what you're intending to grow and market, and they can give you feedback from the standpoint of whether or not this is a good match with the needs of the market. In most cases, you'll need evidence of liability insurance. As I mentioned, both product liability, personal liability, good idea. If you're hoping to sell prepared food, or in some cases, if you'd like to do sampling, you may need health department permits. And so have these in hand as well. Again, visiting with the management of the farmers market will give you information as to the requirement for any health department permits. And then food safety training. Very good idea to go through food safety training if you haven't already, just to understand the realities of growing and marketing safe produce. The third step, sign a market contract. Well, what is going to be on the market contract? Here's an example of the Ozarks Farmers Market at Finley Farms vendor application for 2021. I'm not going to go through all of this here, but basically the vendor application will include some of that information I mentioned before. You'll notice here that this application has a list of products that you propose to grow and sell. There's information there as far as the type of farmer that you are. And if we take a look at that under check vendor category, 100% farmer, that's a farmer who grows all of the products that they plan to market. 100% farmer plus locally supplemented product. Again, that's a farmer who's growing most of what they are selling, but they may also be sourcing other things locally. Are you a value-added producer? Are you an artisan or crafter or concession? Or again, just various categories that you'll want to obviously answer truthfully. There may also be information on that contract as far as the fee structure. As I mentioned before, frequently there'll be an annual fee, and then there may be a stall fee or a PODS. There'll be information on the contract as far as dispute resolution. And this is very important to understand how that process works. There may be information on penalties. If you do something dishonest or contrary to the rules and regulations of the market, then there'll be penalties that might be a result of those actions. And then there'll be information on laws, any local, state, or federal laws that you might have to be aware of and to satisfy. So health department permits, labels on prepared foods, any product claims you might be making. For example, if you're claiming that your product is organic, then you may have to have on hand the results of an organic certification. Your scales will need to be certified. So you may need to have on hand the certification certificate that the Department of Agriculture provided when they tested those scales. And on the subject of certified scales, before we leave that subject, it's very important when you're considering a set of scales that it can be certified, and not all scales can be certified. So if you have any questions about this, check with the Missouri Department of Agriculture. They have a division of weights and measures, which is the state agency that's responsible for certifying scales. And check with them, and they can give you feedback as to whether or not a particular type of scale can be certified. And then, of course, there may be labor laws that have to be satisfied as well. So again, these are all pieces of information that you want to understand before you put your signature on that market contract. Bringing the right equipment. This is the fun stuff, figuring out how you're going to be effective at farmers market. And certainly it's you and your personality and your salesmanship, but it's also the equipment that you bring and how you set up your display. So let's talk a little bit about this. So what are you going to need for an effective display? Well, first of all, you need a display surface, and this is frequently one or more tables. Now, there are other ways that you can display product, and I'll show you some of those moving ahead here. But typically, the plastic folding tables that are 6 or 8 feet long are very effective display surfaces. They're reasonably lightweight to move around. They're also easy to wipe down and clean, and they're very attractive when they're covered with a tablecloth or some other decorative surface. And on that subject, cloth to cover tables, it's always a good idea to dress up your tables. So bring some easily cleanable cloths or perhaps plastic cloths to cover the tables and the display surfaces. Developing a display, oftentimes you can use effectively containers or other materials to display the fruits, vegetables, cut flowers, or other products that you're going to be marketing. So think about what those might look like. You'll need your signage. You'll need a farm sign identifying the farm. And then you'll also need signage that identifies anything special about your farm, such as it's organic or it's local or whatever it might be. And then you'll need signage from the standpoint of pricing. Very important to have clear pricing information on the products at the farmer's market. And then if you're sampling, you'll need sampling equipment and supplies. And this is a whole different set of items. And we just don't have time tonight to dig deeply into this, but I will mention that as far as sampling equipment and supplies, you'll need a surface on which to cut and prepare samples that can be cleaned and sanitized. You'll need typically single serving cups. You may need toothpicks or other items that are single use. You'll need napkins that are single use, and you'll need some way to protect your samples from contamination by flies, dust, or anything else. So some general things to think about. In many cases, the health department will be involved as far as issuing a permit for sampling. Talk with them about what's needed to effectively and safely offer samples at farmers market. Now, as far as actual sales, that signage with clear pricing and product identification is very helpful. I'll show you some pictures here in a moment. Certified scale, clean bags for customers. All of your packaging at farmers market should be clean and new. Don't reuse packages. Don't use used containers like used soda flats, those sorts of things. A cash box and plenty of change if you choose to accept cash. More and more, there is an expectation on the part of customers that vendors accept credit cards or other cashless approaches to purchasing. And particularly in the current atmosphere of COVID, it can be very advantageous for farmers market vendors to offer the opportunity for credit card or cashless purchases. So I would encourage you to consider the setup for this. Now, other things that you want to consider, a pop-up tent or other protection from the weather, particularly if your booth is not under cover. Now, this is obviously important if it's raining, but it's also important if it's a warm, sunny day in July, because it helps keep things cooler. But having a pop-up tent or other protection is very helpful. In my experience, you want to purchase the type of pop-up tent that's easy to put up and easy to put down. And if possible, a pop-up tent that a single person can erect and dismantle. Again, oftentimes there may just be one person or just one or two people initially setting up a display. And so it's helpful to be able to handle all the steps of setting up that display with one person. Equipment to preserve the quality of product. So coolers to keep things cool, ice perhaps to keep things cool, mist bottles to keep things hydrated. All of these are helpful to maintain the quality of produce items over the course of a farmer's market day. And keep in mind that a typical farmer's market day might be anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. Chairs and other comfort items. It's very important to keep hydrated when you're at farmers market. So be sure that you have water bottles with you. It's helpful to have energy snacks. It's helpful to have other things to help support your comfort while you're working at the farmers market booth. Okay, any questions about equipment?
Not at this time.
Okay, now let's talk about the fun thing. That's designing your market display. And quite frankly, I have seen some extremely creative and effective displays. Some of these vendors are not just vendors of produce, but they're also artists in putting together these displays. And I'll have some pictures to share with you. But when you think about an effective display, it all starts with signage. And most farmers markets are going to require you to have a sign identifying your farmer business. And why not make it attractive? Now, granted, the sign that we see here on this market booth is pretty utilitarian, but still attractive in its own right. You'll also want signage for the product, and we'll see some close-ups, but from this distance, you can see signs on each of the individual produce items. And those signs identify the produce, and they also have information on the pricing for the produce. And you may need other signage as well. And again, looking at this booth, we can see in large letters, certified organic. And obviously this farmer is differentiating themselves by noting that they are organic, and they likely have the documentation with them that they can produce if there's any questions about that. Now, the product display itself, it's a general guideline for marketing a farmer's market to have product off the ground, have it on tables or some other elevated structure. There's some obvious benefits to doing this. First of all, of course, it brings it up into clear view of customers as they're walking by the booth. There's also food safety concerns anytime produce is close to the ground. So elevate that produce on a table or some other elevated structure. Make sure that you only bring top quality clean products to market. Again, nothing turns customers off quicker than product that is not top quality. Customers are willing to pay top price, but they demand top quality in return. Keep produce fresh during the market. As I mentioned, having things such as coolers or mist bottles or other approaches to keep things fresh and hydrated is necessary during market, particularly during the warmer part of the marketing season. And if any crop is appearing wilted or bruised, it should be removed from the display. And then keep the display neat and organized. And again, a haphazard display is a drawback. And quite frankly, it can be a turnoff from the standpoint of customers. Place your vegetables in attractive containers. And if possible, tilt the display towards customers. We want, again, a very attractive display, and we want it to be inviting. And by just raising containers and tilting them towards customers improves the viewability of that product. And looking at these carrots, you'll notice how they are angled a little bit towards the gentleman who's looking at them. He can get a very clear picture of the beauty and quality of these carrots because of the way that display was designed. Keep containers and displays full. And looking at this particular display, there is the perception of abundance. And customers at farmers markets respond to abundance. They respond to a beautiful, full display. Now, as the market goes on and product is sold, oftentimes spaces and holes and gaps appear. That's a good signal to condense down displays as needed during the market. So you're going to initially design the display, but you're going to be constantly adjusting the display, condensing it down to maintain that perception of abundance. And I have a friend, and she's one of the most effective farmers market vendors that I know. And her motto is pile it high and watch it fly. Think about color arrangement. And if we look at this display, we can see how the carrots have been arranged in an attractive fashion with the different colors of carrots. We look at this display and we see orange carrots, we see yellow carrots, we see white carrots, and we see purple carrots, all attractively displayed. And this didn't happen by chance. A very effective vendor put this display together. And then use attractive table coverings. Yes, a clean plastic tabletop can be okay, but boy, you can turn it into a dynamite display by putting a check tablecloth or some other way of dressing up that table to enhance the display.
And Patrick, real quick, how likely is it that you sell all of your produce during a single market session?
Well, the goal is so there's a fine line between, well, let me back up here. Your goal, of course, is to maximize sales at the market. And this is done several ways. First of all, of course, it's done by having product to sell. Secondly, it's done by choosing a price that maximizes profit without discouraging purchases. And quite frankly, this balance is achieved sometimes with some difficulty. And in many cases, there will be product left at the end of the market. But if you've maximized sales for that particular day, then you've achieved your goal. If you've sold everything, it might be a sign, first of all, that you haven't brought enough to market, or secondly, it may be a sign that you need to take a look at your pricing. And so, yes, the goal is to maximize sales. The goal obviously is to sell product as well, but don't be discouraged if you have some product left at the end of the day. What you want to really be looking at is the amount of revenue that you've brought in the course of that market. Now, in some cases with some crops, it's inevitable that you sell out. I mentioned that I was marketing peaches. Well, I had my peaches priced at a premium level, but peaches were in such a high demand at the particular farmer's market that I was a member of that invariably we sold out of our crop by the end of the day. Well, what did this mean? Well, it probably meant we needed to bring more peaches, but I was limited by the shipping that I had, the trucks that I had available to bring fruit to market. So I was completely happy with the revenue levels I was at because it represented the amount of crop that I could get to market. Yes, perhaps I could have adjusted price even higher, but I was already receiving what I felt to be a premium price on that fruit. So I was comfortable with the revenue levels that I was at. Do we have any other questions?
That was all for now.
Okay, here's another example of that same display, but zooming in on the beets. And I just love beets. They are so beautiful and so photogenic. And looking at this display, we can see a very effective arrangement of the different colors of beets in these displays. And in fact, the bunches were actually different colored beets within each bunch. So just a lovely, lovely display. If we look behind where the potatoes are, yes, you could have just piled all of those potatoes into a cardboard box and set them on the table, but this farmer had placed the potatoes into these attractive wooden baskets. Now there's a plastic liner that the potatoes are actually in, and the way that these potatoes were sold was by the container. And when it came time to sell a container, all the vendor had to do was to gather up the bag around the potatoes and pull it out of the basket, send the bag of potatoes off with the customer, and then redesign the display to fill that gap. And so again, just a very attractive display. And again, I want to point out, looking at the beets and the carrots in front, how those display areas are angled so that the crop is facing people as they come into this particular farmer's market booth. Back to our garlic booth, I just really like the way that this was set up. Again, notice again that the boxes of garlic are angled towards the customer. Notice also that the vendors in this particular booth all have Blue Rooster garlic shirts on. So they're wearing a shirt that identifies them as vendors. They're also differentiating themselves by wearing these shirts. And when customers come to the market, they may not remember that the booth was called Blue Rooster Garlic, but they're going to remember that it's that booth that had the garlic where everyone had those blue shirts on. So it'll be a simple matter to identify that booth for return customers.
And one quick question for you, Patrick.
Yes.
How do you keep carrot and beet tops from wilting?
So first of all, the carrots and the beets need to be fresh coming to market. If they've been in storage for any length of time, it's going to be difficult keeping the greens from wilting. You can mist the greens, and that's helpful. If the greens are prone to wilting, it's better to bring the carrots and the beets to market, yes, with the top and stem still attached, but with the leaves removed. Yes, I really appreciate a beautiful bunch of beets or carrots with the greens still attached, but if they're starting to wilt, then those greens become a liability. So try to keep them fresh by misting, or remove them if they aren't going to stay fresh during market. Here's another nice example of a display. And certainly the fact that these peppers are all in attractive baskets adds to the beauty of the display, but look at the arrangements of colors. And when you think about arranging colors, think back to the color wheel. And the color wheel is such a useful guide. It's like, well, here's the rules. Break these rules at your peril. But when you look at the color wheel, those colors that are adjacent to each other are complementary colors, and they work well together. Those colors that are opposite each other are contrasting colors, and they work together. For example, red and green are contrasting colors. And look at the nice combination of those jalapenos and those Italian frying peppers. They just, by their colors and such, are attractive. This vendor has also done a nice job of mixing the different shapes of peppers together. So all in all, she's just done a really nice job with this display. It's not a big display, but it's a very attractive display. And then, of course, you combine that with her tabletops, which are covered with these tablecloths. Wow, what a nice display. Here's some more examples of abundance. Looking at the heirloom tomatoes on the right, they're piled up. Now, this display took a bit of time to put together, but it's just a lovely, lovely display of those different types of tomatoes. Notice also how the vendor has gone to pains to separate the different types of tomatoes based upon color. Another thing that's interesting to note here, if you look behind the tomatoes, you'll see basil. And when you think about combinations, the combination of tomato and basil is just that match made in heaven. And certainly in a fresh caprese salad or any sort of pasta dish where you're combining tomatoes with basil, or on a pizza margherita or something like that, my goodness, when you look at this, you see the tomatoes and then you look up and you see the basil, and perhaps you even smell the basil, you're probably going to buy both. Looking at the parsnips, this is a really nice display. Parsnips sometimes get a bit of a bum rap, but my goodness, if they're cooked properly, they're absolutely delicious. And I find them very attractive in a display like this. Notice the signage, certified organic parsnips. This is a neat sign because yes, it's a bit rustic, but it obviously was put together with artistry in mind. You can see the green leaves around the certified organic and the nice way that the lettering is placed on the sign. And then you have a little added rustic touch there with the clip clamp, the spring clamp holding it in place on the lug. And I'll point out that lug too. That is a plastic lug, very easy to clean and sanitize that lug in between the market days as you bring crop to market. Here's a couple of other really nice examples. Look how photogenic that rhubarb is. Now here's a vegetable that relates directly back to that question concerning the greens on beets and carrots. Rhubarb has a large green leaf on it, and it's nearly impossible to keep that leaf from wilting during the course of a market day. So just from the outset, it's an advantage to remove that leaf. But should you take that leaf all the way off? Well, in this case, the vendor left enough of that green there to add to the beauty of that display. I really like that approach. Notice also that the vendor left the entire stem of the rhubarb, even the sheath, the base of the rhubarb, in place. So you have a little bit of light color contrasting at the end of the stem. The other thing about rhubarb stems, if you cut them, if you cut off that end, the stems then begin to dry out at that point and they split. You can see that at that top stem at the very top. And that's not particularly attractive. I think the approach that this vendor used with most of these stems to leave a bit of green on and to pull them and leave the sheath on is very attractive, and it adds to the length of time that display will hold up even on a warm day. The picture on the right, what a neat display of carrots, a carrot tower. That is so cool. Now, granted, it took some time to put this together, but customers are going to appreciate the time it took to put that together, the artistry behind that stack of that tower of carrots. Notice also the tablecloth under those carrots. It was chosen deliberately with colors that worked well with the carrots. Looking at the tablecloth under the rhubarb, again, that's a white tablecloth, a very elegant touch to a very elegant display. And the rhubarb, of course, is in a wicker basket, just a really nice display.
Yeah, those are really lovely photos, definitely. We've got kind of a multi-layered question coming for you. Someone says that in Wright County, they see a lot of vendors buying and reselling auction produce, especially Amish raised produce. It's gotten very prevalent and they've had to stop using the Missouri grown produce boxes that customers recognize because they're coming from the county food auctions. So they're wondering how to compete with that because it's hard to compete in price selling actual organic produce against non-organic auction produce. Does
Yes,
that make sense?
let me tackle that one. Is there another part to that question, Anna?
No, that's
Okay.
it. It's just
I'm
becoming
sorry,
very prevalent and they are wondering how to compete with that.
Yes, and I completely understand your concern. As I mentioned before, some markets are farmers only markets where the farmer is expected to grow the crops that they are selling at that market. And obviously that would be a place to focus on because that concern wouldn't be there. Now, granted, there are vendors that will sometimes bend the rules or even downright try to break the rules. And typically there are structures in place if there are concerns that other vendors have that a particular vendor is bringing in produce that they didn't grow. Some markets will allow supplementation. As I mentioned, that would be a situation where in most cases, the vendor is expected to label and identify any crop that they did not grow themselves. And so again, that would be one option. I would recommend to the person who asked that question to go to some effort in their signage to point out that they do grow all of their product, that all of that product came from their farm. And I think that would be a way to differentiate their booth from other booths that might be supplementing. There is a lot of interest in actual local production and meeting the farmer who actually grew or supporting the farmer who actually grew the crop. So it's in your interest to tell that story as loudly as you can with your signage and perhaps even a brochure or some other way to point out that what you're selling is what you actually grew. And if you're certified organic, by all means, put signage in place to talk about that. Be cautious, though, if you are not certified organic, even if you're using organic production practices, the term organic is a defined term, and there are USDA regulations that require you to be certified organic if you label your crop as organic. There is a small producer exemption, but I don't remember what the exact level of sales is, but it's a fairly low level. If you don't exceed that level, you can call your crop organic if it is indeed grown with organic practices and you're not certified. But once you exceed that level of sales, then you're required to be certified organic before you label your crop as organic.
And I guess just a question of clarity, if you could just speak for a moment to make sure everyone understands what auction produce means.
Yes. So in a number of places around Missouri, Webster County is a good example, there are produce auctions. And a produce auction is where the members of that auction bring their crop, their fruits, vegetables, in some cases cut flowers, and then they are sold in the course of an auction to the highest bidder. Now, who buys produce at an auction like this? Well, sometimes institutions, restaurants, grocery stores, sometimes people who are going to take that produce home and use it. And in other cases, people buy produce that they are then going to resell. And I think that's what where that question may have originated. And then that produce can be taken to a roadside stand or perhaps even to a farmer's market and resold. So yeah, that's how produce auctions work. And produce auctions are certainly a viable way to market crop. But when a crop purchased at a produce auction is then taken to a farmer's market for sale, if that farmer's market is a farmer's only market, then that's contrary to the rules of the market. If that market allows supplementation, then that is allowed.
Makes sense. Thank you. And asking the question about auctions, they've started inviting people to come out to their farm, see it in the field, and even to pick it themselves. So that's kind of a nice way of differentiating yourself.
It is indeed. And I'll mention now, I think I mentioned it a little bit later on, but this is a good time to mention that a farmer's market is a great place to promote your farm. And particularly if you have an on-farm stand as well as a farmer's market stand, use both of them to drive customers to both places. And oftentimes farmers who have a long-term goal to be marketing on the farm will start out in the short term marketing at a farmer's market. You know, farmer's market is great because someone else has developed the market, someone else has chosen the location, someone else is doing the promoting. All you have to do is grow the crop, harvest it, drive it to market and sell it. But in the long term, maybe your goal is to be on the farm full time and to market from the farm. Well, the farmer's market is a great place to share that story with customers and say, oh, you know, in a year or two, we're going to have this wonderful farm market with all kinds of on-farm experiences. Come on out and see us. Pass out flyers, direct people to your website, all of those things. You can use the farmer's market as a great promotional tool.
Very good idea. No more questions right now.
Okay. I like this picture as well. You know, I was talking about sampling and I was talking about differentiation. You know, at a farmer's market, sampling Irish potatoes typically is not what people do. You don't eat a raw potato. But I really like the way that this vendor has taken potatoes and cut them, put them on sticks and stuck them in the lugs where the potatoes are for sale. And they've done a really nice job, first of all, of while you're not physically eating it, you can still sample the inside of that potato by looking at those cut pieces. And secondly, they've differentiated their crop. You know, potatoes look much alike. Yes, there are some differences in skin color, but when you cut that potato across and you see that the Yukon Gold is indeed gold through the center, and that all red potato is red in the middle, and Desiree up there at the top is bright white, Maris Piper is bright white, and then that very interesting purple potato there on the right side is actually purple in the middle with a white shell around the outside. Really adds to the interest of this particular display of potatoes. Here's a nice example.
Quick, specific question for you.
Yes.
We have someone curious about mushrooms. She's starting a mushroom farm, and Iowa has laws based on wild versus cultivating. Do you, Patrick, happen to know about Missouri having any laws unique to mushroom cultivation? or perhaps know where they could look to find that?
Yes, yes. Well, a couple of comments. If you are farming mushrooms, if you're growing something like shiitakes or oyster mushrooms or mayatakes or portobellos or whatever they might be, as long as it's a farm mushroom, there are no restrictions on marketing those mushrooms at farmers market. Now, it's an entirely different matter if you're foraging and wild harvesting mushrooms. In that case, the mushrooms have to be certified by a person who's been trained to recognize which mushrooms are safe for consumption. And this is, quite frankly, has been a bit of a bottleneck in Missouri because the people who have received this training to certify mushrooms are few and far between. Personally speaking, I have been certified to identify morel mushrooms, but that's the only mushroom that I'm certified to identify. And if you're harvesting something like chanterelles or puffballs or any of the other wonderful, delicious edible wild mushrooms, you can't sell those at farmers market unless they have been certified by someone who has been trained in identifying them. Now, those people who are serious about wild harvesting and selling those mushrooms can themselves become certified. But the problem we have now is that there's a shortage of certification programs out there. Now, if a person is interested in morel mushrooms, I can offer that training, again, because I've been certified. But I've not been certified in any of the other wonderful, delicious wild mushrooms. So I have to say that that is a bit of a bottleneck. And a number of us who work with mushrooms have discussed with the Missouri Department of Health and Human Services, which is the agency that regulates mushrooms, about ways that we can work through this particular impasse. And hopefully we'll see some resolution moving ahead. But right now, it's a challenge to legally sell wild harvested mushrooms. But if you're farming the mushrooms, no problem.
So just to clarify, so it's the wild harvested ones that need someone to come and verify. But if you are farming them, you have less bottlenecks.
That's correct. In fact, there's very few bottlenecks if you're farming them. And when I say farming them, I mean, obviously you're developing a substrate or obtaining logs or whatever it might be, and you're inoculating that with a known type of mushroom. So in other words, the risk of selling that mushroom and it making someone sick are very, very slight. When you're wild harvesting mushrooms, there's always that risk that there might be a lookalike wild mushroom that could be harvested along with the healthy or with the safe edible mushrooms and, unknowingly make someone ill. That's why the regulations are in place on wild harvested mushrooms.
Great, thank you. And that's very interesting that you have to certify one mushroom at a time. That's interesting.
It is interesting.
That person followed up, I believe this is relating to Iowa, but saying that they cannot sell wild mushrooms that have been grown from public land. So just one more barrier there if you are.
And in fact, I think that may be the case in Missouri on public lands as well. There may be the possibility of collecting permits, but in most cases in Missouri, foraged mushrooms are coming from private lands rather than from public lands. I don't know if that is indeed codified in laws, but just my experience with wild harvested mushrooms, in most cases, they're coming from private lands.
All right, great. And we do have a person who would love to get some more information about getting a morel certification. So perhaps they can email us after the webinar and we can connect you.
Yes, keep your cell phone. Yep, keep your cell phone handy. And the last slide has my contact information, and snap a picture of that. And please feel free to reach out. And I'd love to offer that class if we can get a group of people together who'd like to be a certified morel.
Oh, that could be a really fun workshop to have.
It could indeed. That might be something we consider through Springfield Community Gardens as well.
Yeah. And one more question about, I believe, the last slide with those cut potatoes. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to treat them so that they don't brown in the air, or is that just part of your day?
Eventually they will brown, but what I've seen people do is to spray the cut surfaces with a citric acid mixture. You can use lemon juice for this, or you can use crystallized citric acid, and that slows down the browning process.
Great tip. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, well, keep those questions coming. I like this display as well here. And this is nice because obviously the flowers speak for themselves as far as their beauty. It's a nice display. Notice the clear pricing. Notice the fact that this vendor accepts credit cards. I do take a little bit of issue with the signage. It's all done by hand, and it's a little bit I think it could be more attractive, but it serves its purpose. It serves its purpose. Another lovely display of tulips, but my concern here is they are on a table without any sort of covering, and they're in buckets that aren't particularly attractive. And the sign itself could be improved as well. What saves this display, of course, is the beauty of the tulips. This is kind of cool. I came upon this at a farmer's market in the Seattle area where they were selling tulips by the stem. You can make whatever sized arrangement you like. You could have an armful of tulips if you so desire. And here's an example, I think, of a display that needed to be condensed. And this was getting towards the end of the farmer's market. There wasn't much product left. Things looked kind of scant. It might have been to the farmer's advantage to move those baskets closer together, perhaps even condense them down into a mixed basket of different types of vegetables. You know, the third from the left it's a good approach, but some of those other vegetables I think could have been combined to better effect. Okay, some more thoughts on designing an effective market display. Produce food safety needs to be considered because you can do everything right as a farmer in growing crops safely and handling them safely and bringing them to market safely, but then things can happen at the market that can cause concerns from the standpoint of produce food safety. Think about ways that you can minimize customer contact with your produce. In other words, it's a natural tendency of people to reach out and feel vegetables and to feel fruit. Try to figure out ways that you can design a display so this is kept to a minimum. And also, it's a good practice, even though we want to encourage the use of reusable totes and those sorts of things among customers at farmers market, it's in your interest to place produce from your display into a clean new bag and then place that inside the customer's tote or personal bag. We can see that happening here. These are actually sweet cherries. They're in individual containers, so the customer doesn't have to touch the cherries, and then they are poured into a single-use bag, and then the customer can place that into their tote or their personal bag. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about pricing. And this can be a real challenge for new farmers market vendors. How do we come up with a price that is certainly fair from the standpoint of the customer, that doesn't turn customers off, but yet returns a fair amount of revenue to the vendor that is working in the market? And there's three things to consider. Those are, first of all, the cost of producing the crop, customers and what they're willing to pay, and the competition. Those are the three C's of setting prices, and it's important to understand each one of those three C's. Now, probably the trickiest one is the one in the middle, those customers. How much are customers willing to pay? And you can get a bit of a feel for this by the demographics of the people who live near a market and who frequent markets. But it can be a little bit of a challenge to understand this until you're actually marketing at the farmer's market and you notice people's reactions to price points. The cost, it's in your interest to understand the cost of producing the crop, the cost of harvesting and handling the crop, the cost of transporting the crop to market, and the cost of actually marketing at the farmer's market. Competitors, well, walk around the market, see who else has similar items to what you have and what they're charging. This can be a good way to get a feel for a price that is acceptable to the customers at that particular market, but is also returning a fair revenue to the vendors who are charging that price. So again, it can be a bit of a challenge, but you can still arrive at a fair price when you consider the three C's. Now, again, understanding costs, I mentioned that there are lots of things to think about, and understanding these costs is the result of good record keeping. So it's important that you take the time to keep good records to understand what it really does cost to market crops. It's also important to keep records as far as what you're selling, because then you can relate volume of sales to the cost to produce that volume. And this gives you a clear understanding of how much it actually costs per unit, which helps guide you in developing the price per unit. Now, what is a fair profit? Well, typically at a grocery store, the markup is somewhere between 3 to 7 times. So at a farmer's market, a good place to start is perhaps 3 times the cost of producing the crop. That should give you a reasonable place to start. If that level is out of line with what other vendors are selling, examine their prices closely to make sure that they're not using those particular items as loss leaders. It's also important to look at, if you come up with a cost per unit item that or price per unit item that is out of line from the standpoint of what people are willing to purchase, then you may need to adjust the way that you grow and handle that crop, or you may need to consider some other crop that is more profitable at the farmer's market. Now, in some cases, I mentioned loss leaders. It may be an advantage to have particular items in your display where the price that you're forced to ask for it does not return a great deal of profit. That's perfectly all right, as long as you have other items in that display that do return a fair profit. So it's not just the per unit item of a particular item. It's the overall pricing structure for everything that you have on your display. Keep in mind that you can use different prices at different markets. I frequently see this, the same vendor, the same produce item, but if it's an affluent market, if it's an urban market, that crop may receive a higher price than if it's in a small town market. Consider different sales approaches at different markets. Some markets, because of the vendors who shop there, may be looking for volume. For example, tomatoes. I've been to markets where vendors will have a special price for what are called canner tomatoes. These are tomatoes that are not cosmetically perfect. They're perfectly sound, but they're not cosmetically perfect. And the vendor will make those available at a quantity discount. If you buy 20 pounds or 40 pounds, the price per pound is reduced compared to buying a smaller quantity. And when you set prices, always think about multiplying, adding, and subtracting. And yes, you can do this in your head. For me, math was never my strong suit. So when we were at farmers market, we always set our prices in units of 50 cents. Easy to make change in a unit of 50 cents. It's also kind of fun to keep $50 in your sales apron when you're making change, because people always look at that $50 and they remember where they got that $50. Some other things to think about. Do not just copy the prices of other farmers at the market. Yes, it's a good idea to survey pricing, but don't just copy those prices. You need to understand your cost of production, and then you need to understand if you have something about your product that differentiates it, that makes it more valuable perhaps than the prices that other farmers are receiving. Be careful not to set the price initially too low. It's much better to set the price on the high side and then, if necessary, lower the price. But don't set the price too low, because it's more of a challenge to raise price as time goes by. And do not discount prices at the end of the market. If you have to take crop home, that's fine. But if you discount prices at the end of the market, people are going to wait till the end of the market to come by your booth, because that's the pattern they're going to come to expect. So don't discount prices at the end of the market. Keep in mind that if you do have crop left over at the end of the market, there are lots of ways that you can use that crop. You can donate it. You can bring it home and sell it on farm. There are various ways that you can use any crop that you have left at the end of the market. Okay, now let's talk a bit about making sales at the market. Now, I asked this question early on, and I'll ask it again. Do you like to interact with a diverse group of interesting people? Well, if the answer is no, find someone else to run the farmer's market stand. You saw this picture of me earlier. I am very much at home in an orchard. I don't mind sweating. I don't mind picking peaches. I don't mind grading peaches. I don't mind packing peaches. But there are days where I just don't want to talk to anyone. And on those days, I'm not the best person to have at the farmer's market booth. On the other hand, there are people like my father-in-law. My father-in-law, he's retired now, sold insurance as a livelihood. He has a gift, a skill, a knack of talking to people. And we used to bring him to farmer's market and sit him out in front of our peach booth, and he could bring anyone into that booth and he could sell peaches to anyone. That was a gift that he had that I did not have. Now, granted, I like people, I like interacting with people, but sometimes there's days I'm much happier climbing into a peach tree. Now, setting yourself up for success at the market. It's a good idea to use the same staff at the market, because not only will people remember the booth and the product, but they'll remember the people in the booth. And my wife and daughters were particularly effective at farmers market sales. And particularly when my daughters were small, people remembered those cute little girls in the prairie dresses at that peach stand. And so using the same staff gives you that continuity from market day to market day that people will recognize and in fact come to value. I was at market one time, and the girls were at the booth, and I was wandering around just kind of listening into conversations of the people waiting in line to buy peaches. And I heard a couple of customers say, "Oh, this is that booth. This is where we get, this is our farm." And it's like, whoa, it was pretty cool to hear customers call Byers Orchard our farm. And again, that was because they recognized the booth. Obviously, we were bringing quality, but they also recognized the overall experience of interacting with my daughters at farmers market. All staff should be trained. Again, people don't come to a farmer's market and they're not happy getting a Walmart experience where the person that you talk to doesn't know much about what's actually in the display. Staff should be trained. Staff should be conservatively dressed in clean clothes. Again, it just makes sense. No cell phones or other distractions. I'm going to say this more than once tonight, but there is nothing that turns customers off quicker than someone at a farmer's market booth that is on the phone, that is distracted, that is not focusing their attention on the customer. Always follow market rules. This is very important. A certain amount of operating at market is on the honor system, but word will get around very quickly if you are breaking rules. Your other vendors will be watching, and don't break rules. Be truthful about where the produce was grown. Pay your stall fee. Pay your PODS. Be honest about your PODS. And don't sell before the market opens. This is a rule across the board at farmers markets. There's a period of time where vendors set up, and frequently customers will start wandering into the market before the official opening time. It is dishonest, and in fact, it's a disservice to the market and to your fellow vendors to be selling before the market opens up. Now, once that opening gun or that opening gong or the bell rings, then it's fair game to start selling. But don't sell product before the market opens.
Patrick, quick question. As you're
Yes.
talking about, the importance of having a team with you and selecting the right people, but do you have any advice for people who might be farming and marketing solo?
Farming and marketing solo, quite frankly, is a challenge. Keep in mind that you can't be two places at once, right? And you're going to have to carve out the time necessary to be effective at the farmer's market. And I'll talk a little bit about what my reality was here a little bit later on when I was selling at farmer's market. But yes, that can be a challenge. It can be done. It can be done. I know a number of vendors who grow everything on their farm, and then they are the primary person who sells at the market. And some of them have been doing this for many years. But I will say it is a challenge, and there is frequently a scale that you really can't move beyond if you're the person who's doing both the production and the sales. So it's important to recognize what that level is. Now, that doesn't have to limit your revenue at market. You just need to focus on crops that are particularly valuable, that have a particularly high profit potential. Crops like cut flowers, for example, or edible flowers, or berries, or even something like garlic that's differentiated, can be a valuable enough crop that you can see reasonable revenue levels if you're the only person involved in both production and marketing. Okay, now some other tips on making sales. You really want to deliver customer service at farmers market. Again, I can't stress this enough. People, when they come to farmers market, do not want a grocery store, a home improvement store, a mass merchandiser experience. They want personalized customer service. They want eye contact. They want friendly people. They want interaction. So again, no cell phones or other distractions. Serve only one customer at a time. Don't be looking over the shoulder of the customer that you're serving at the next customer. Focus on one customer at a time. Yes, you want to visit, and that's very important, but don't make people wait. People don't want to wait in line any longer than necessary in general. And at farmers market, they're there to have a good time, and waiting in line is not particularly good. Now, sometimes lines are inevitable. I remember in particular a vendor at the Webb City Farmers Market who, this was not a produce vendor, this was a baked goods vendor, They had lovely, lovely baked goods, and there was always a line of people, 10, 15 people deep waiting to get up to that booth. And the solution to making that waiting experience fun was for one of the members of that particular business to walk down the line and serve samples. And so while people were waiting in line, they were munching cookies or munching small pieces of sweet rolls or whatever it might be. And yes, this made the waiting more pleasurable. It also built the anticipation for when you did get up to the actual booth to pick out your baked goods. And there are lots of ways that you can add value to that experience of waiting in line. Know your products. Obviously, having educated sales staff is really important, but understand your products and how they can be used, certainly in fresh form, but also what you might do with your products. Remembering back to that picture I showed you of the parsnips. Well, not a lot of people know what to do with parsnips, but my goodness, if you get someone who's interested in parsnips, share with them how you can make them into soup, or you can roast them, or you can bake parsnips. You can whip them like you would mashed potatoes. They're absolutely delicious in lots of different ways. Keep track of when people arrive at your stand. That way you can serve people in the order at which they arrived. Give samples if allowed, add value to the experience at your stand. Provide recipes or after sales resources, and then smile a lot. Thank people for stopping and thank people for supporting your farm. When I think back to my experience at Farmers Market booth, I think the smiles on my daughter's faces were probably the most powerful advertising that I had for those peaches. Yes, the peaches were fabulous. Yes, people had a good experience, but boy, those two little girls in those prairie dresses smiling at people was just so powerful in adding to the experience of the people at our booth. So again, overall customer service is what it's all about. And just to show you some examples, this was interesting. This was at the Salt Lake City Farmers Market, and they have this program at the Salt Lake County Jail. This is for minor offenders and people at the minimum security prison. Well, they have a prison farm. They grow things. They grow cut flowers, and they grow other things, and they market them at the Salt Lake City Farmers Market. And you might notice this gentleman has a green shirt on. You can see the gentleman behind him has the green shirt on. And yes, Salt Lake City County Jail is on that shirt, but it also identifies them as being involved in this particular project. And nice display. They're interacting with customers. They're chatting. They're making sales. They're actually building skills that hopefully that will be valuable to them when they're released from incarceration. But they're also providing a nice experience as people come into this farmers market booth. Here's another nice display, again, a small scale display. This gentleman perhaps did grow all these crops himself, but he's got a clean shirt on. He's interacting with the customers. He has an attractive display. He's probably talking with people about what to do with those beets on the end there, and why some of those beets are orange and others are red. But again, there's all kinds of things you can do to add to the experience of visiting a farmer's market booth. Sampling. So here's yours truly at the River Market in Kansas City. And I was involved in a project where we were trying to raise awareness of pawpaws. And so what we did is we teamed with the market to set up a farmer's market booth. We didn't really sell anything, but we were offering pawpaw samples, both samples of fresh pawpaw and also samples of gluten-free pawpaw muffins. And that's what we see here. And this was a very effective project that we had. I think we kept count. I think we interacted with about 170 people, many of whom had never tasted pawpaw before. And we ended up going through almost 3 bushels of pawpaws, and gosh, how many muffins? It was like 50 pawpaw muffins cut into small pieces. Now, to make this work, we had to have permission from the health department in Kansas City. We had to undergo a health department inspection before the market opened. We had to wear gloves, as you can see on my hands there. The muffin slices and the pawpaw slices were in single service little cups that you see there. They were kept undercover so flies couldn't get in. We gave people toothpicks and single serve napkins to sample the products. And then we had a trash can to put all of the waste into. Now, this approach generates a lot of waste. I will be the first to say I'm not real happy about that. But the bottom line is these are all practices intended to make the sampling process and experience safe for the customers. What you can't see here is we had cutting boards that we regularly cleaned and sanitized, knives that we cleaned and sanitized, and hand washing stations, both for ourselves and for any of the people who are sampling our product as well. So again, these were all requirements of the health department to make it work. But my goodness, did it work? It was a very good experience. Now, adding value to your sales at the market, bring information about your farm. Even if you're not going to be selling from the farm, it's still important to tell the story. And people, the customers at farmers market want to know the story. And then again, you can promote other aspects of your business. As I mentioned, you can promote that on-farm stand. You can promote the pick your own that you have. You can promote the value-added products that you're making. There are just lots of ways that you can use that experience in your booth to add value, certainly for the customer, but also to add value for you as the farmer. Smile a lot, thank people for stopping, and thank people for supporting your farm. I think that's the third time now that you've seen that. And I really can't stress that enough. That's key to making sales at farmers market. Now, just a few comments on my experience as Byers Orchard. Before we get into this, do we have any questions, Anna?
We are all caught up right now.
Okay. My farm is located east of Springfield, and for a number of years, we grew and marketed peaches, and we were members of the Greater Springfield Farmers Market from 1994 to 2008. We sold primarily peaches. Over the years, we added other things as we had them available on our farm. One year we did tomatoes, one year we did sweet corn, but peaches were the mainstay of our farmers market booth. Now, how did it work? Well, both my wife and I had full-time jobs off the farm, and we had to figure out how this was going to work. And so a lot of the operations in the orchard took place on weekends, but farmers markets, the operations took place the evening before market. Greater Springfield Farmers Market operates a Saturday market, but they also operate a Tuesday morning market and a Thursday morning market. And during the peach season, we were at most of those markets, again, from July through early September. And the way that it worked for us, the evening before market, when I came home from work and the team was together, we would start about 6 o'clock. We'd harvest fruit, we'd grade and pack fruit. Our goal was to have 2 pickup loads of peaches ready to go to market the next morning. So it took a lot of work. And by the time it was getting dark, then we would start grading and packing fruit. We sold in several different size containers. We sold in 5-pound boxes, 10-pound boxes, and 2.5-pound bags. We also would line up our sales team the evening before. We typically had 3 to 4 people at the booth. That's what it took to provide the customer service that we needed during the market day. We would pack up our trucks with supplies and fruit the night before, and then park the trucks in my metal building where we could keep the fruit cool, count out our change, put together our shirts, our sales aprons, and all of our other support materials, the sales shelves, the pop-up tent, all the other things we would need because we were going to be leaving early the next morning, and it's much easier to do all of that the night before. Market day. Well, we would have a hearty breakfast, typically somewhere around 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And we knew this because once you get to market, once you start setting up and once you start selling, there's not time to eat. There is time to down an energy bar in between customers, but there's definitely not time to sit down and have a breakfast. So we had a hearty breakfast early in the day. Everything was packed up and ready to go. We'd load up the trucks. Sometimes the girls would sleep on the way to market, but load up the trucks, and then we'd leave out for market about between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. At that time, the Greater Springfield Farmers Market did not have assigned booths, so it was first come, first served. And we knew which booths were particularly desirable, so we had to get in line early enough to stand a good chance of getting those booths. We wanted booths typically that were towards the center of the market rather than at either end, because that way we could get customers as they went by generally in 2 directions. Well, get to market and set up at market. The first step is to pop up the tent. Secondly, is to set up our tarps. You can see them behind the tent. They're shading the fruit in the truck. At Greater Springfield, this was an outside market. This was a rainy day, but we were still selling peaches, even though it was a rainy day. Put together our display. Typically, we would have clouds on the table for on this day, because it was raining, we just did not have a cloth because it would have gotten wet. You can see my signage there for Byers Orchard. You can see our signs that discuss pricing. You can see our shirts. The people who worked the booth all had Byers Orchard shirts on. And you can see our displays kept the peaches up off the ground, and the shelves in front actually tipped the peaches a little bit towards people, so they got a good, clear view of the fruit. And then sales. Again, there's always this temptation because our goal was to be set up and ready to go at least 30 minutes before market began. That way we could do any last minute things, and there was time to run into the mall and go to the bathroom and all those sorts of things before market actually began. But as soon as we set those peaches out, people started lining up, and they would be lined up 15, 20 minutes before market opened. People would say, well, can I just buy some peaches now? The answer is no. Until the market bell rings, we are not selling fruit because that's the market rule. We used aprons with change pockets. It's very important when you're working farmers market to have a quick way to make change. As I mentioned, our pricing was 50-cent increments, so it was easy to make change. It was easy to keep $50 because then you just pull one coin out of your change apron to make the 50-cent change. And we always brought somewhere between $200 and $300 in change. It seemed like, oh gosh, almost every market inevitably people would pay with 50s and 100s, and you had to make change for those. And if that happened early in the market before you had brought in revenue, it would be really hard to have enough change then moving out from that. So it's important to come to market with a lot of change to start with. When we were selling, this was back in the day before credit card sales became expected at farmers market. Today, generally much simpler with credit card based sales. Obviously, there is a price to pay for taking credit card sales, but it does certainly simplify the entire process of the financial interaction with the customers. Note the shirts. We had Byers Orchard shirts. They were all green, and our logo in large print was on the back, small print on the front. Very easy to identify our sales team. Keep hydrated. This is so important, particularly on a warm, sunny day. You're working, you're interacting, you're talking. Very easy to get dehydrated without even knowing it. So keep hydrated. And then smile a lot. Thank people for stopping, and thank people for supporting your farm. But we got really good at that. I'll point out a couple of people in these pictures. The gentleman with the beard in the lower picture is my brother-in-law, and he's let's say he's a unique person, but my goodness, he inherited from his dad that skill of talking with anyone and convincing anyone that what they need to take home is a 10-pound box of peaches. So it was a real pleasure to have Chris at the booth with us. And again, you can see my wife there. The upper picture is my two daughters when they were younger. These girls are now in their early 30s with babies. So this picture obviously was from a long time ago. But having young people associated with farmers market sales is an excellent way to teach marketing skills, to teach customer interaction, to teach just how to interact with people. And again, quite frankly, it was a real selling point for my fruit. Okay, that is the end of my prepared remarks on marketing at farmers market. I do want to mention a number of resources that are available from ATRA. They have a range of different marketing resources. They have what they call the marketing tip sheet series, which includes tip sheets on all of these different approaches to marketing, including farmers market marketing. They have some other informational resources that are helpful for farmers market vendors, things such as how to structure your business, how to prepare your taxes, guidance for beginning farmers and accounting, and how to plan for profit. Very important things. And so at this point, this is the end of our prepared presentation, but we have plenty of time for any questions that there might be. And Anna, do we have any questions?
We don't at this second, but if anyone has a final one they'd like to get in, they are more than welcome to. Otherwise, yeah, obviously Patrick is a wealth of information, and we're always happy to help more people produce their own food and be very productive at that. So please really don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Patrick.
Yes, again, as Anna mentioned, my job as a horticulture field specialist is to help farmers with profitability and sustainability. And I'd love to develop an individual relationship with anyone on the workshop tonight. If there's some aspect of your farming business that you'd like to visit with further, please reach out. And as I mentioned earlier, there are wonderful resources available from Springfield Community Gardens, particularly to support new farmers. So check out their Farmer Incubator program.
Well, I think that's it. So we're going to say good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.